to a Hope 1032 podcast.
I'm Colette Smart, and I'm a psychologist, a teacher, and your host on Raising Teens. I'm also a parent, and I'm in the middle of raising my own teens and young adult children. I know that raising teens can be fun and busy, but also terrifying and even lonely. I've experienced all of these emotions, sometimes in the same day. On this podcast, I'm joined by well-known experts, and we chat about some of the most common questions I get asked about raising teenagers in my own work, and even some questions I have myself. I have such hope for this generation of young people, so each episode is full of support and practical advice. I love seeing all your questions come in, so each season I focus on some that teachers, parents, and carers have raised. We're all caring for the teens we love so much, so please keep sending in your ideas and questions through my Instagram and Facebook page or via the Hope 1032 podcast webpage, so we can support this generation of teens together. Dr. Lee Nair is an Australian sports psychologist who has lived and worked in Singapore since 2012. Her expertise is working with young athletes who experience performance anxiety and in teaching them strategies to thrive in the competitive environment. Dr. Lee's master's and doctorate degrees focused on the study of perfectionism in sport. When she moved to Singapore, she found herself in the perfect place to support high achievers and perfectionists in a very competitive, results-focused nation. Her practice there has fueled her passion in the area of psychology and compelled her to share these insights in her book, Good Sport. Originally from Perth, Dr. Lee completed her first 2 degrees in psychology in the United States while accepting an athletic scholarship to play NCAA's Division I collegiate golf. She finished with academic All-American honors and attributes her career as a sports psychologist to the success she achieved in both sport and studies. Hello, Lee. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Raising Teens. And you are joining us all the way from Singapore, which is fantastic. I'd love for you to just start off telling us a little bit about your golfing history. So I said to you before we started recording, I come from a line of golfers. My dad played golf my entire life. My brother played scratch golf. My eldest son is really getting into golf, which is his grandfather's absolute delight. Tell us about your golfing history, because I know my family would be interested.
Oh, that's so cool. Golf has played a huge role in my life, and also I think in developing my career as a sports psychologist. So I grew up in Perth in Western Australia, and I lived on a golf course. My dad, he had 3 girls, and I think he wanted to have 3 boys. But we all played from a really young age, and we were all really good players. We were very dedicated. So I would say that from about the age of 6 all the way through, I was what you would call a specialist in golf only. Didn't really do much else than that. And that was just like basically like our whole family unit was functioning around golf and weekend competitions. I had the really wonderful opportunity when I was younger to be part of the very first junior girls golf club, or, the golf community that, and a lot of the girls that were, just the founding members, they've all just, some of them are professional now. A lot of them have gone to play college golf. So it really was just a really great time to be a junior player and also to be a junior girl golfer.
Yeah, because I know growing up, most of the men in my life played golf, and my dad and all his mates, there weren't a lot of women. I mean, I used to have a knock around, and I wasn't fantastic, but it was certainly more a male-dominated sport. So, yeah, there would have been a lot more opportunities then, I suppose, once girls started coming into the sport.
Yeah, and it's interesting as we talk about it. I think there was still a lot of, I think, just segregation, if we call it,
Okay.
between the guys and the girls. But we would play with the boys. Of course, when you play as a female golfer, you play off ladies' tees.
Yes.
I do distinctly remember, and this is a story that I told in a Lee Nair circle for IHG a few years ago, but I remember being about 12 and playing beautiful golf. I was the only girl in the group with 3 other boys. They had their dads caddying. I was on my own, and there was a mum following. I was obviously kicking their butts, and we get to the 9th hole, and the dad commented on how far ahead the ladies' tee box was for that hole and said, "Oh, it's a great day to be a girl, isn't it?"
Oh.
I remember saying, I was like, "What?" And the mum just looked at him and said, "Every day is a great day to be a girl, isn't it?" And that was, I think, the first time, that I felt this, gender bias and this strange competition. But overall, it was a very positive experience growing up in Australia playing golf. Yeah, that's really paved the way for a lot of the things that I've done.
And then you went to the US. You ended up playing, getting a scholarship. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I had the wonderful opportunity to play college golf, so Division 1, Pac-10, on a full athletic scholarship. And back then, that was something that, people really just didn't even know what that was about.
Yeah.
So, that was really an incredible experience. And, I had the most, amazing time playing with just the most incredible players.
Brilliant. This has kind of taken you then on a journey to particularly working with young people and elite athletes. I'd love to just start off really thinking about when you have a teen who loves sport. So my youngest is 16, so I'm thinking particularly I'm in the thick of that at the moment. What is our role as parents? I know we spend so much time investing in whether it's fees or uniforms or drop-off pickup, sitting on the side of the courts and so on. You talk a lot about what our role is as parents in terms of the emotional investment and so on. Talk to me about what you think the best way is for us to be involved in our children's sport without being overbearing.
Yeah, I know it's tricky, and this is a huge passion piece for me, and why I wrote my book, because working with families who are invested and athletes that love their sport, and finding that way to be involved with your child and your athlete as they go through the journey is really important. And what I could see, maybe going back 10 years ago, the general message for most parents who are highly involved was just stay away. Like, I just felt like that's not how I grew up with my sport and my parents' involvement. And that cannot be the only way.
Yeah.
So I started to do a lot of research on it, and then starting to, test different approaches with parents and their athletes. And my belief is that you have to be the collaborator. Parents cannot be the instructor or the director, for sure. I mean, that's what we have coaches for.
Yeah.
And if we look at kids of this generation, they don't listen to instructions anyway. You definitely have to find a different approach, and the collaborator is the key. I think you have to be going on the journey with them and helping them start to understand for themselves how they are performing. So, helping them connect with their strengths. And that just takes conversations, questions, helping them build their independent awareness and just kind of like walking the journey alongside them. I think that's the approach that we need to be aware of. Let's face it, like sport is emotional.
Yes.
Sport is really, it's full of emotion. And most parents have this idea, and this is in the research as well, that in order to accelerate improvement in our kids, we have to scrutinize the mistakes. But what I found is that that's not going to build your connection or your relationship through sport, and it's not necessary.
So do you think, you mentioned there that parents used to kind of be more hands-off. Has it swung? I feel like anecdotally for me, I'm seeing the swing of parents being over-involved, the over-involved parent on the sideline. You just mentioned there scrutinizing the mistakes, parents being critical and yelling at the coaches and, parents being banned from the side of the courts because they're too over-involved. Has there been a change in how parents are involved?
I don't believe so. I think that it's been I feel like there is an approach that most parents just fall into. And I think that just comes from our human nature to want to point out errors, to believe that scrutinizing mistakes is the best way for improvement. So I think this has just kind of gone all the way through.
Okay, so it's something that's kind of been there all along, the scrutiny and so on.
But the issue these days is, one, we have developing perfectionists, in society with our young children. So already they scrutinize the mistakes themselves already. Okay, we have high achievers. The only thing they're looking at is the mistakes they're making. Yeah. They are highly self-critical, competitive, individualistic. So pointing out their mistakes just exacerbates their dilemmas when it comes to competition. Now, of course, there is a place for that, and coaches can go through that with them. Okay. But when it comes to the support with parents, it doesn't add value at all in terms of, I
want to get into that a little bit. I was going to ask you about girls, but I'm going to come back to that question. So in your work, you give advice on various aspects of game day, I've seen. So I want to talk about during the game and after the game. So let's start with during the game. So what do we do when we have a teen who you've already said might be already picking apart their own game? They might be highly critical of themselves. So they get to an event, it's not going well. What if your teen completely loses it? They display poor sportsmanship, they lash out at their teammates, they throw the ball, throw their clubs, or whatever it might be, or yell at you as the parent on the sideline. How do we support our teens when they're going through that?
So, of course, when we see this happening, it's natural to want to give out instructions, as it do this, try that. But when it comes to young athletes, they are already getting tons of messages from their coaches. They are trying to connect with their teammates. And then on top of it, you have this distraction from parents who feel like they need to say something and it can help, but it just creates all kinds of distraction.
So you're saying that's the coach's role. If they are lashing out at their teammates or throwing the club or the ball, that is their coach's role to step in at that point during the game?
Well, yeah, good question. I would say still even then, this is where they have to go through it. I think there's a time and a place for athletes to then sort of dissect and look at the key habits that they're engaging in and how that's affecting their performance. But when they are inside the performance, what athletes really want from parents and coaches is what we call attentional silence, or silent encouragement. That means they don't really connect with any verbal instructions and advice, but what they do really value and take on board is the non-verbal cues that you can give them that just show a level of support and understanding for the moment. So sometimes that can simply be like a nod and a smile, or a signal to them that, they just need to shift in a particular way. And that's something you can prepare with your athlete way before they go into their match or into their race.
So when you say shift into a particular way, you mean their body or their mood? What are you referring to there?
So when parents are sort of in the stands and they're watching and they're seeing all this going on, or they're walking the course or whatever it is, they are simply, it's a gesture. It's a gesture of support, encouragement, and it's completely nonverbal. And all the research suggests that this is what athletes value the most, and this is what they need when they are performing.
And so that's in terms of encouragement, or you're not talking about how they're actually playing, because that's up to the coach. You mean more encouragement that you're kind of there for them?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
If I profile all athletes when they are not doing so well, what I also see in their habits is a tendency to look over more often at their parents.
That's fascinating.
But they are really needing, it's a little connection that they need. It's just that little sort of like, hey, you got this. It's okay. This gesture. And it's completely missed by a lot of parents. What also can happen is some parents trying very hard, very, very good, and knowing that they can't say too much, they do the opposite where they have the blank face and they sit there and they just try to be like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to sit there. But athletes can interpret that as ambiguous. Okay. So they often say, are they mad at me? Like, I can't tell. Like, what are they thinking? And so that can also be an issue. So I know this sounds like it's very difficult to be a sport parent. But the thing is, you just need to prepare and have that little gesture of encouragement. And that's what we call attentional silence.
That's so fascinating because it makes me think about the times that my children have looked over to me when they're playing. It's me being much more conscious that my face and my body language is showing encouragement, not showing disappointment or frustration that they've missed the point or that their team is down. They don't need that from me. What my son needs from me is that encouragement, but in a nonverbal way. So, yeah, that's fascinating. And so what about the teen who you can see getting down on themselves during the game? Would that be the same kind of thing? They're looking to you for that nonverbal encouragement when they're getting down on themselves. I mean, I've been able to tell with my children their own body language when they're disappointed in the game themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly the same, even for team sports. Every athlete on that field has their own individual role, and they will look to their coach more often. They'll look to their parents more often when things are not going well, and they're looking for that little, sense of like, it's okay. And that's really all they need from you when they're performing.
Yeah, I'm not disappointed in you.
Mm-hmm.
I love being here watching you play, that kind of body language.
Yes.
So I want to ask about performance anxiety. Performance anxiety, I feel like, can hit maybe a bit before the game or your match, but also perhaps in your game. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about the anxious athletes. How do we help them when they choke under pressure?
Yeah, this is a loaded question, but this is something that over the years, 95% of the young athletes that come to see me are experiencing performance anxiety. And that's why, how do we work through this? And there are layers to it in terms of changing their performance anxiety. But the very first thing that is important for all athletes when they're starting to compete and they're experiencing anxiety is they need to start to have things to control and to feel a sense of control with inside their games. The thing is, when they compete and they're in sort of autopilot, they're often just focusing on the result.
Yes.
The result, winning or hoping they're not going to lose. That's where all the anxiety is coming from. Because when it comes to a focus purely on the result, they do not have a high degree of control over those things. And the focus is shifted all the way into the future. So they're not focused on what they're doing. They're not thinking about the point or the play. They're just thinking about the future. Okay. So it's really important to say, okay, like park that and start to look at the things that athletes can build their confidence around and a sense of control with to then create high performance. And they are simple things that we take for granted, like body language, good routines. It's things like positive self-talk. And the number one element would be good reactions to mistakes. That is a habit that we need to help our young athletes develop over and above everything else when it comes to competition in early days.
So what would good reactions to mistakes look like for a young teen? So I'm thinking of one of my children who really got down on themselves when they missed a point or didn't score something. What does that look like then, having a good reaction? How do I help that teenager learn how to have a good reaction?
So, yeah, this is where the actual reaction itself, they do super well when they're, performing at their best, but they don't realize that their reactions to the mistake is also supporting and continuing their good performances. And it's simple. Usually all they do is when they make a mistake, they say things like, it's okay, next point. Or some of them, if they get frustrated, if they're making multiple errors in a row, they might need something a bit more physical, which could be like a release breath, sort of shaking it out of their body, something that kind of is more physical. For football players, they will like chase down the ball, run into position and sort of get it out physically.
Okay.
But it's usually a pretty simple process for them to then go through in about 5 seconds, letting go of the mistake and then focusing on the game at hand.
And so that's something they would practice or think about beforehand so that they are ready to do that in the game.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's something that I take my athletes through is we literally will visualize moments where they are making an error and they visualize good reactions to it and moving on and refocusing on the next point. And this is such a game changer for a lot of young athletes because most of them go into their games trying not to make mistakes.
Yes.
And this has massive consequences on their performance and also their reactions to mistakes. And then everything compounds and they will go down into a spiral.
Yes, because they're going in wanting not to make a mistake and the mistakes inevitably happen. You even look at the top athletes. There's very few games where they go in and you might have an amazing game where one off where you don't ever make mistakes, but they do make mistakes. And I think what shows the difference between an elite athlete and someone who's not is exactly that point, is that their reaction when they make mistakes is quite different. They are able to move past it.
Yes, that is absolutely the truth. But what we perceive when we watch elite athletes is we perceive that there's perfection. We perceive they're doing everything perfectly. We perceive that there's precision and we perceive that they're not making mistakes.
Yes.
But they absolutely are. They might be sort of a minimal in terms of, what we could see in an amateur versus an elite athlete, but they are still making mistakes and we can't see them because of their good reactions.
Yes. So it's not that they're not making mistakes, it's they've actually got really good at having better reactions. That's fantastic. And so now after the game, a game hasn't gone really well. Can you talk about debrief time? So when is it appropriate? How do we go about talking with our teenagers and what do we say after a game, especially if it hasn't gone very well?
Yeah, this is the hardest space of all, I think, for everyone to go through, parent and athlete. And what I see is that timing is very important when it comes to understanding when you can debrief, when you can talk about things. If things have not gone well, especially the older they get into their years, it's all emotional. And so it's important to talk to them already about, when you have a really tough day, what would you like me to do after the game? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want just some time alone? And just kind of put that on the table in terms of what I would call road rules when you are the car ride home.
So almost giving them permission to tell you what works for them. I'm just thinking of one of my children really preferred utter silence all the way home because they just did not want to debrief in that time home. And that, I suppose, thinking back, that came from a conversation where after many times of trying to talk to them, they eventually blurted out, "Can you just not talk on the way home, please? I just need to be quiet." And I learned that for that child, the silence is what they needed.
Yes, and it's okay. Parents, I think, can be very anxious about but no, this is the most important teachable moment. I have to use it. I have to show them, what they need to learn. But they know their mistakes, finest detail of their mistakes already. They are going through just the emotion of the loss or, the poor performance, and they need that time, and that's okay. And we don't have to jump on it in terms of creating that teachable moment. There will be time to have a conversation about it, but if they need space, it's really important, and they will really be appreciative if you understand that.
Won't you also talk to us a little bit about some of the things that we're not doing that well in our conversations with parents? I think you talk about the compliment sandwich and then something called good, better, how. Won't you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think there is this technique that we can all fall into so easily, which is called the compliment sandwich when it comes to debriefing with athletes, which is typically where you start with saying something that is a little bit more critical about their performance, and then you throw in something that's supposed to be a little more positive, and then you finish it off again with something that's a little more positive. But the thing about this is that when you look at the sandwich approach, what we do as parents is often when we start talking about the critical part, the mistakes, they're usually very specific, like saying, on that hole, you three-putted. But when they start to throw in that nice little sandwich piece in the middle, it's really vague. Like, but you did a good job today. You did a good job. It's not specific. It's vague. So the mistakes and the scrutiny is really specific. The positives are really vague and wishy-washy. And athletes pick this up. And you're not hiding anything. They can still see what you're trying to do, and it's not useful.
And you feel kind of better about yourself as a parent. I'm parenting so great because, look, I threw in the compliment. But you're right. You're so right. It's that wishy-washy. And again, I think you're trying to use that teachable moment, but it's all wrong and the timing is wrong.
Yes. And so, that's all they hear. They're like, okay, they know exactly where this is going.
Yes.
We don't need to do that at all. I think it's really important to have, basically allow your athlete to lead the conversation in terms of their experience of their competition. So that's one thing. But when it comes to that beautiful method, the good, better, how, this can be such a great ritual to maybe just build on or use in your car ride home. It's something that athletes can anticipate every time. And all it is simply saying, okay, let's look at 3 things you did well today, 1 thing that you can improve. You're going to do that in your next match. And that is just a really beautiful, simple way for them to assess their performance. And then you can, listen and you can add to it in a way. And you can also keep this completely consistent regardless of whether they perform well or whether they had a bad day. You can do the same good, better, how method every time.
That's brilliant. I'm absolutely going to use that at my son's next game. I think that's amazing because what I am hearing is the 3 things they did well really tips the scales. Then we're not talking about, all the things you could do better and throwing in the vague bit in the compliment sandwich. It's very specific, 3 things that you did well, and then picking up on one aspect that they might feel they could have done a bit better, and how would they do that next time? What would that look like? That's magnificent. And I love the way that you're saying it's kind of consistent, so it becomes part of the discussion. They know it's part of the routine in a way, and it's positive. It's not negative, and you're not nitpicking everything that they did wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this just comes from my discussions with all of these beautiful young athletes that I get to work with, where they tell me, I ask them, so what's the conversation like when you play poorly? And they'll all say, it's like constant train wreck of a conversation that I have to go through over and over and over about my mistakes. And then, what about when you perform well? There's nothing. They just ask me where we want for dinner. So I feel like this is the discrepancy that we create and the pain we go through after a poor performance. And this method can change all of those things.
Yeah, or sometimes I'm thinking even the times that they do well, we really go overboard with how fantastic it was. And again, we're reinforcing that we're only kind of happy when you've performed well. And then we're going to nitpick and scrutinize when something hasn't gone well. I've seen in a lot of your work and your book, you talk about the red zone, orange zone, green zone. Why don't you just unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah, sure. So this is, I would say, something that I absolutely love to do with all my athletes is profile these zones. And I started this years ago just because I had never worked with young athletes before. As you can imagine, as a young sports psychologist, you only learn from the elite profiles. But what I started to do is say, okay, like let me see, how do they experience really great performance? How does a young athlete experience really bad performances? Let's look at it. And there definitely is key patterns across the board. And I'm telling you, it matches what the elite athletes also experience in a poor match or in a great game. So with the red zone, it's just typical negative emotions they're experiencing, and you'll see a lot of unproductive focus in their thoughts and in their mind, a lot of self-criticism. Actions would be definitely more hesitant. But there is something that I found to be really significant when I profiled the green zone for every single young athlete over the course of a few years. And what was remarkable, knowing that none of them had sports psychology training before, this is the first step, every single one of them in their green zone had positive reactions to their mistakes.
Wow.
And I felt like, okay, this is a natural thing they're bringing out when they're performing well. They don't realize it. This is what we're supposed to be helping them develop, to be more resilient, to be more in control. And of course, what I could see in the red zone is a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure, but a constant focus on trying not to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And so, this is where I started to write my book, because I thought that, this is what parents and coaches need to understand. There's something about what we're doing in coaching and supporting our athletes that's promoting the red zone and not promoting enough of the green zone.
And what is that? What are we doing that promotes the red zone?
What we're doing is that when athletes get to a certain age, which is around 12, and they go from that beautiful space of playing sport just for fun to more serious.
Okay.
And when that happens in that transition, the focus on improvement is simply about scrutiny of mistakes and technical perfection. And that means that they start to prioritize in their mind minimizing mistakes. Mistakes are bad. You cannot have mistakes if you want to perform well. So they start to shift in believing that the goal to perform well in sport is to not make errors. And so what happens with that is they tend to become more hesitant, more cautious, more indecisive in their performance. And it all stems from that coaching around prioritizing mistakes.
Yes. And so how then do we shift that focus as a parent, or I'm sure we'll have coaches listening, how do we shift our children's thinking out of the red zone more into the green zone? Is there language we use? What makes that shift?
Yeah, I think a lot of things where when we've got to change the entire attitude around mistakes, and also for ourselves, because let's face it, as high achieving parents, you're also perfectionistic and you also don't like making mistakes. So we have to change the attitude to being comfortable with mistakes and building a high tolerance for them also, so that an athlete recognizes that there's no such thing as a mistake like, oh, I shouldn't make that mistake. That's a silly error, or that's a crucial point. Mistakes are mistakes, they're just statistics. And what we see is if we train the idea of prioritizing reactions to mistakes, then everything can be so much more adjustable and they develop resilience in their games.
And so what are the kind of things that you say to your athletes to train them in green zone thinking, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, so one of the most simple things that I do is show them the facts from their green zone profile. with how well they just respond to mistakes and how they don't prioritize mistakes at all when they're performing well. So it's the evidence is already there. And basically we just show it. We put it on the table and say, see how you do things when you're performing well. You actually are more free. You are not caring about your mistakes.
Yeah.
And so we bring that into their system. We make this a priority in terms of key habits. And yeah, the whole attitude around mistakes can start to change.
And so we get them to focus on some of their strengths rather than just their mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. Those strengths, like it can be things where they focus on one point at a time. They focus on their tactics. They focus on their strategy, on being decisive, being committed, positive self-talk, and working on those key habits so that they can feel in control and more confident.
I want to just come back to, I said in the beginning, I wanted to talk a little bit about girls. And you as you said, you're one of 3 daughters, and your dad did an amazing job with getting his girls to continue with exercise and sport. We know statistically that around the teen years, there's a big drop-off in girls in sport. What can we do better to help our teen girls stay involved in sport, particularly if they have a talent and we're not wanting to force them into something they don't want to do? What can we do? I think body image probably plays a big role in this. Well, not probably. We know that from the research. What can we do to keep girls in sport better?
Yeah, this is a great question. What I believe is that as girls progress, especially in their sport, they actually prioritize relationships. And this is something that's so important to them and I think can navigate, the step from quitting or moving out of sport and staying in it, is that I think coaches don't realize, and parents don't realize how important the communication, the relationship becomes with girls in sport. And they value their friendships they value their coach, and that's that continuation of support as well. And I think that's what can help in terms of seeing them through.
So encouraging their sport as their community in a way.
Yes, it's really important. And there's so much great evidence now to show that when there's a really strong group of young girls, training together and, just living and breathing that really good identity, there's a lot of great things that can come out of that. But they tend to be relationship focused, not performance focused as much as we think. And this is something that we need to help them build and nurture.
Beautiful. Finally, Jaylee, I would love to ask you what I ask all my guests on the episode. I want you to finish with hope, and I would love you to talk to us about what your hope is for teens who play sport.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's so cool. My hope is that all young athletes that have a passion for their sport really just embrace and just learn their strengths as they go through their journey of training and competing. I hope that they start to recognize what they're capable of. Yeah. I want them to be able to see naturally what they're great at mentally and physically and embrace it, and then start to transfer that to every other part of their life, because I feel like that's what sport is all about. It's about, really bringing out your best self in all challenging situations and then being able to really use that moving forward.
Thank you, Jaylee. You are talking my dad's language, so I think he's going to love this episode. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, and your questions were so wonderful. I really, really loved being on your show. Thank you.
I think the section that will stay with me after today was Jaylee's good, better, how technique. I just love how strengths rather than nitpicking the negatives, but then also allowing our teens to work on where they can grow. If you found this episode helpful or gained some useful insight into it, please subscribe and review wherever you get your podcasts, and consider sharing it with friends and family.
1032. Thanks for listening.